My name's Johnny Stewart. I'm a product manager here at Puppet. My background is in the cybersecurity world. I used to work for a company called Rapid7. And from that sort of industry coming between cybersecurity and then into Puppet, I've always been really, really curious about black hats or attackers, and similarly about white hats who generally be defenders or people like us. What I noticed when it came to Puppet was that there's a really strong community presence in Puppet, which is unique, to have that many people contributing open source content and sharing content with each other, especially through the Forge. And I really love seeing the new Forge that Alex showed in the keynote this morning. So what I'm trying to encourage is us to work as a community to defend, because this slide is my past and what I would call the ostrich approach. So I previously worked in a development engineering team, and we adopted the ostrich approach sometimes when it came to vulnerability assessment. So we would have received spreadsheets or PDFs from our counterparts in InfoSec, and they could be thousands of rows long, and we actually just didn't know what to do, was our main problem. So what happened with those spreadsheets is they get attached to a Jira ticket, put in the backlog, and we rarely came back to them. We might have just touched the surface, and most of that was just because we didn't really know what to do. And then the other part of the situation was that generally we had a business to respond to and features to deliver or a product to deliver. And when it came down to deciding between do we do the features or do we deal with the security backlog, it was nearly always the features that won over security. So that's kind of what made me think there must be a better way to do this. I can't be the only person that's remediating this vulnerability. I mean, everybody has the same type of vulnerability, but we just didn't share. Company A didn't share with company B. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about today, is starting off a little bit about why at a high level the communities work. Some issues with DevSecOps that we'll touch on. I'm going to go straight into what happens when communities work not for the good, but actually try and work against us as enterprises. And then finally, how can we also work as a community to bring that back and us to work together. So this is about my background before I got into IT several years ago, was in research, marine biology particularly. So I really love ecology, so you're always going to get an ecology reference from me. And Puppet loves dogs, so this tied both together. On the attack side, groups work really, really well. So the most successful hunters in the world is African hunting dogs. With the pack just as small as 20 dogs, they can have a success rate when hunting of about 67% of the time. And with bigger packs, they get that up to over 90% success rate when they go hunting. But it's not all doom and gloom. On the positive side, for the defenders or the white hats, kind of similar to dolphins adversaries or dolphins attackers have bigger jaws than they do, they have sharper teeth than they do, yet dolphins actually always win. And that's because they work as a group, generally about 30 dolphins in a pod, but you can actually have up to 1,000. Two weapons that dolphins have that their adversaries don't have is that they communicate well with each other, so they can all keep in touch with what's happening in the rest of the pod, even in a large group. And the other thing is they just intimidate their attackers by their sheer numbers. So that's kind of why I find it so interesting is working as groups. But jumping into the attackers side, so the black hats, or along the wild dog reference, the attackers of our enterprises are actually already organized as a community, and they're very well organized. It's not people sitting at home on a terminal. It's actually they communicate in the dark net, which is kind of like a 1990s version of the public net. They have coordinated marketplaces where you can buy and sell services, so very, very similar to ours. They have carts that you can put services into. You pay for that probably in Bitcoin rather than cash, but and then the last part of that is the community in the darknet is really, really strong. So if you're not familiar with it, when you're in the darknet, part of what makes you anonymous is that you jump through several VPNs before you get to the your-end website that you're trying to get to. Those VPNs are all community driven. There's nobody paying for those. And that's just people that use the darknet help out, and they pop VPNs up and down constantly. So at any one time, your traffic will be routed differently, and that helps to make it anonymous. So they're very, very well organized when they get that together. The darknet itself, I mentioned it's not all terminal. It's actually quite well organized. So it's very, very easy to sign up. The top left of that slide there, that's the sign up pages for a Tor browser. So it's really easy. It's as easy as any other sign up for a product. Big businesses have actually realized that it's not such a scary place. It's actually quite normal. And even Facebook have a legitimate presence on the darknet. They have an equivalent website there. But that's where it kind of starts to diverge from what we would know as the properly sort of indexed internet, the publicly available one. It is still really, really slow to navigate. And that screenshot, the dark one, is a marketplace. And it looks the same as a marketplace as you would expect to see, but on the darknet, that one is specifically selling services that would hack someone's social media. So for instance, it would be Instagram or Facebook or something like that. And you can see, if you look really closely, it's $50 to get someone's social media account hacked. So it's not great. Bringing this to our level of enterprises and the damage it can do. Like being an academic, I look for what academics have studied in the area of the darknet before. There was a paper I found, someone has studied the growth of content that's harmful to enterprises over the last 3 years, from 2016 to 2019. And content harmful to enterprises grew by 20% just over those 3 years. And on total on the darknet, over 60% of it is harmful to enterprises, and the rest is kind of what you would think it would be. So there's things like there, like drugs and things like that. But the content that's harmful to us as enterprises, it damages our businesses primarily in 3 different categories. So one of those categories is it can defraud your enterprise. So that is basically just steal your IP or just pure espionage, stealing whatever it is your secret sauce in your business. Disrupting your business is your typical attacks. So you can hire someone to do like a distributed denial of service on an enterprise's website, or even just insert malware into your website. And the last one is devaluing your business. So you might devalue your business, give you reputational damage. So if your customers' data is stolen, made public, that's damage to your brand. So that's the 3 main categories. And just to highlight how easy it actually is, I've blanked out some of the URLs in these mockups, but you'd tend to see they all end in .onion at the end. So this screenshot is a website I found. It's categorized, it's not indexed very well, but someone has categorized this. I clicked into the hacking one, and these are adverts you can see for hackers and different sort of services that's for offer. And if I zoom in even a bit closer, you can kind of see the standard in there. So the top one is a hacker offering their services. Then there's someone offering stolen goods, e-money, and the last one is hacks for a computer game for anyone that played Fortnite. So it's a real mixed bag is what you get there, and it's really, really hard to navigate around. But for instance, if you go into the top one there, this is someone that calls themselves Digital Gangster, and he's advertising or she's advertising that they do hacking, DDoSing, social engineering with a typo in it, espionage, malware development, that sort of thing. So that took about 5 minutes to organize that, and then you'd probably hire that person and pay them in Bitcoin. So bringing this back to DevOps and Puppet, I think hopefully you're at the keynote this morning. The 2019 State of DevOps report expanded on the 5 levels of DevOps that were covered in up until 2018. This one was really, really security focused. And the whole report is great to read, but there's a couple of graphs that really, really stuck out for me. This first one was the friction between the security team and the DevOps teams. So you can see here the 5 levels across the bottom is from last year's report, 2018, and that's level 5 being the highest level of DevOps and level 1 being someone who's just starting out in their journey. At all stages, there is friction. So the question was, does the security team feel friction when they're trying to contribute to the group? It's highest at the middle stages. So as you get further down your DevOps journey, you'll find that friction increases. And it might actually decrease towards the end, but it's still there. So there is a lot of friction between security teams and non-security teams. Still quite high, even at the highest levels. And you can see, if you look closely, the bold bars is the responses from the security teams. So it's actually the security teams find this even worse than the DevOps teams. So they do want in, and we just kind of need to work with them a bit more. And then this is the second graph that really, really stood out to me in the report. Less than 7% of the respondents can respond to a critical vulnerability in less than an hour. A lot of that is actually just hard to reduce the time. There's people factors in there, there's stakeholders, there's handoffs between teams, there's waiting for approvals, and obviously testing changes before you push them out. And even when you remove these, there's still blockers. You still need to know how to fix that vulnerability and how you actually find the answer. So on the whole, you can see there it takes people roughly under a week, about a week to get rid of just one critical vulnerability. So you can see the differences at the different levels are there, but just not as dramatic as what we would have liked to see. So we'll try to why we started investigating vulnerability remediation, and is there anything that we could do as a community so that as we could get the Puppet community together and try to be more like the dolphins and communicate more. So part of the question is, why don't we work together, is what really got me. At this conference, there's hundreds of organizations here. So if we did one task each and shared it with each other, that would be a few hundred done in probably less than a day. And we could share those solutions with each other. The other one is it's not a profit-making part of any of our businesses. None of us get paid to go and remediate vulnerabilities, or we certainly don't make profit from remediating them. It's just something that we all need to get done. And it's not something that we compete on, so it's the sort of thing that we really, really should collaborate with. That's really, really much easier for me to say than it actually is for us to do. But there are advantages that we have over the attackers or the Blackhats. We actually have a lot more people. So there's just not just this conference. You kind of saw in the keynote this morning, there's tens of thousands of people using Puppet today. We are organized in the open, so you can coordinate freely. We've also got law on our side, so it's legal for what we do, so we can get backing there. And then we also have a choice of both open source software to do this, so Bolt and Puppet open source, and then there's also the commercial software, which is Puppet Remediate, which you saw this morning. And then we also share the Forge, which also was on the keynote this morning. Puppet Remediate will take the content from the Forge and run the tasks in that. And just going to jump into a demo in a second. But before I jump into the demo, I just wanted to explain to you about how Puppet Remediate works. So we've integration points with 3 of the main security providers. So that's Tenable, both Tenable Security Center and Tenable.io, with Rapid7 and also with Qualys. So today, when you get the handover in a spreadsheet or a PDF from your security team, this will actually pull the data from an API. So your security team no longer need to produce that report, and you also don't need to ask them, do you have the latest data, because you will always get the latest data from the API. So once you have that data in Puppet Remediate, you then need to be able to remediate the vulnerability on the target server. So you can either write that solution yourself. So if there's people who are not in the Puppet team that help remediate your vulnerabilities, they can contribute PowerShell scripts if they've got them. They can contribute any sort of scripts that you've got an interpreter for in Linux. So it could just be pure Python or Perl or anything like that. Or it can be a proper Puppet module that includes a task from the Puppet Forge. That's where we would encourage people to share their tasks, is in the Forge, so that all of us as a community can work together and share the same content. So once you've got your vulnerability data into Puppet Remediate, you can search for tasks to help you fix that vulnerability, and then run an agentless-based task on the target server. Sorry, and I'll just cut over to the demo from that point. So I'm going to jump into a quick demo. What I'm going to demonstrate here is 3 different vulnerabilities. I'm going to demonstrate fixing the highest risk vulnerability in my environment. I'm then going to demonstrate fixing a more complicated vulnerability that I don't know how to fix. So I'm going to have to rely on community contributed content. In this case, it comes from a public contributor. And then the final thing I'm going to demonstrate is looking at a Windows vulnerability, which is one from way back in 2011. Compare this to your current flow today. So as I'm running through this, think about your process when you get handed a long spreadsheet to remediate, or a PDF, or the system you use today. So instead of a spreadsheet, I have this dashboard. It's organized in the way IT ops generally look at their data when it comes in. So this is the highest risk in my environment. This is the worst node, or the most vulnerable node in my environment. And then the most common vulnerabilities. So this, if I fix this one, it will fix the same vulnerability across 15 nodes in my environment. And at the bottom, we rank by Puppet risk score, which is no more than the risk score that comes from a vendor, the security vendor, multiplied by the nodes affected. So in this case, I'm connected to Rapid7, but my highest risk in my environment is 776 out of 1,000, which is the score I got from them. So I'm going to click into that one, see what it is. So you can see the 776. So if I look at this, this is something to do with MySQL. The remediation that I've got from the security tool is update MySQL. Scroll down, have a look. It affects several nodes in my environment. So let's see if we can update MySQL by managing a package. Upgrade MySQL. Review the nodes, so make sure I might know all the nodes, so in this case I do, so I'm going to fix them all at once. Good. This is a Linux. Let's take my SSH credentials. Just review it to make sure I'm not doing anything silly. So the action is an upgrade. It's going to upgrade MySQL. It's going to use my SSH keys, and it's going to affect these 4 nodes. So I let that run. If you're like me, I kind of like to look at the logs just to make sure it was successful, but you don't need to. So this is the manage package task that's running. If I click in, just finished. And it's also done some discovery of extra resources on that. So it's very subtly, at the same time as fixing a vulnerability, it also checks what software is running, what packages are on that box. So that should be that first one, which is kind of simple, resolved. The second vulnerability, this is the instance where your CIO or your CTO comes into work. They've watched the news, and the first thing they do in the morning is walk into work and say, I've heard about this thing called Meltdown on the news. Do we have it? The normal answer that we have to give is, I don't know. Ask the security team to run a report for Meltdown. It's not great. So one of the things that we wanted to improve was that. So CIO has asked me, do we have Meltdown? I can Google or find out what the CVE for Meltdown is. In this case, it's 2017 5754. So I do have Meltdown. I have it on CentOS, Debian, and Ubuntu. So if I look at the Ubuntu one, not much of a description of how to remediate Meltdown, and I know it's more complicated than that. I can immediately tell my CIO or CTO that 6% of our network is affected, which is one node. So it's a level of comfort that I know already how badly affected we are. So I'm going to go look for a solution. In this case, it's the old Forge. This will very soon go to the new Forge that you've seen in the keynote, which looks great. So Remediate runs tasks. So I'm going to filter for only modules that have tasks on them. I'm going to look for Meltdown. And there's one here for Meltdown. I can also see that it has tasks. Click in and have a look. There is a task for Linux, which looks like the right thing for me. So I am going to either review this module, or in this case, I'm just going to download it. Come back to Puppet Remediate, and I'm going to add that task straight into my instance. This means this was going to be uploaded for me to use straight away, but also my teammates can use this afterwards. So I'm going to add it into the tasks, upload a module, the one I just downloaded. Go to my downloads, Meltdown one. Okay, that's saved. You can see this Meltdown Linux update task is now there. The rest of them were out of the box when I bought the product. There's also force offer the hotfix, and there's also the Windows update if you've got Meltdown on your Windows boxes. So let's go back and run this task against the Meltdown box. Back to my Ubuntu box. So hopefully there should be a new task that I've just installed. And there is, that's the Meltdown Linux update. I'm gonna both force this. These are the parameters from the module. I'm actually gonna force the reboot as well. Review it. I'm gonna run it on my Ubuntu box. Linux, so it's SSH. Review it quickly and run the task. So again, I'm gonna go back into the logs, into the activity feed here, and check what's happening. So this one, as you've seen, I downloaded the task directly from the Forge. I probably would have reviewed it more than this, but when you run it, you can see this did a lot of activity in the standard out. And the bottom of that, you can see it just in the reboot at the end. Okay, so hopefully that should be Meltdown is now remediated on the Ubuntu box. And lastly, what I wanted to demo was that this is not just for Linux, this is also for Windows. And I'm by no means a Windows expert, so I probably need help with most Windows remediations. And there's one here in my top 5. And this is called Beast. It's also known as Sweep 32, which is an old one, I think 2011. Yeah, so I don't know how to fix this one. It says there, no server-side mitigation available against the Beast attack. Rather than me trying to work that out, for Microsoft, I quite often just use their script center. So copy the CVE. And then I'm gonna, this is the Microsoft script center. Paste the CVE in there and just have a search. Sometimes you're lucky and there's a PowerShell already there. Just look for scripts only. And in this one, there is a script. And it's a PowerShell. So I'm gonna go ahead and download this PowerShell just directly from their website. Agree to their terms. And similar to uploading a module, you can come back and add PowerShell scripts. This is also where you'd be adding Linux. In this case, I've already uploaded the PowerShell script earlier on this morning. But similarly, if I needed to upload it, you just add tasks there. So any teammates who don't even know Puppet can upload PowerShell or their other scripts as well. If I come back to the vulnerabilities and go back to that one, so it's on all my Windows boxes. So I'm going to run the Sweep 32 script. I'm going to fix all my Windows boxes at once. In this case, it's WinRM credentials that I've put in earlier on. Run that task, and again, I'm going to go back to the logs just so you can see this, what this one looks like on Windows. So this one's finished. And you can see it's the logs of all the boxes, and it's also done some discovery of resources on those boxes at the same time. So that should be these 3 vulnerabilities remediated, and that was just in a few minutes. The next thing you'll be waiting for is your security team to run a scan. As soon as they run a scan, that will verify those vulnerabilities are gone from the box. And as soon as they run their scan, Remediate will detect they have done an extra scan, and we will pull in the extra data to remediate, and the dashboard will update. So in this case, I have sped up the security scan. So in this case, I'm using Rapid7, and I have a site called Puppetize PDX. So I'm going to scan it straight away, just to rescan. Start it. And that once that scan's finished, Puppet Remediate will identify there's been a new scan and pull the data in. So our top risk was 776, and it's gone. So it's now down to 771 is the highest risk in our environment. So let's just double check that. The last one I fixed was something to do with MySQL. My highest risk now is something to do with libxml2. So that's a different one. So that looks like the first one has gone, my highest risk. The second vulnerability I then remediated was one called Meltdown. and I remediated that on the Ubuntu box. So if I just search for Meltdown again, it's still in my environment. So it's still there on CentOS and Debian, but it's not on Ubuntu anymore. So it's great that's that one verified. And then the last one for me to try and verify is the Windows one, the Suite 32 or Beast. So I come down to the bottom. It was number 5 on my list, which has been replaced by a SQLite vulnerability. So I just want to double check and search for Suite 32 CVE. It was 2011. Okay, so when I've done a search, it's come back to say no results is found. That means that vulnerability does not exist in my environment. So that's the Windows one is remediated as well. So you can see that was 3 remediations in probably just a few minutes. And compared to like the State of DevOps report, none of those were critical vulnerabilities, but the fact where people can't remediate a vulnerability in less than an hour is something that we can hopefully address together. One of those, I used a module from the Forge that someone had already contributed. It was actually one of our SEs in Holland wrote that. And the PowerShell one was from Microsoft. That was nothing to do with Puppet or even our community. So it's quite quick to remediate those. And that's the end of this demo. But I'll be about for the rest of the show. If we can cut back to the slides. So moving on from the demo and how it all works, the key things for me is to be more like the dolphins. So please do contribute content. I mean, don't be contributing something that's confidential to your environment, but a lot of customers I would speak to don't contribute content because they think what they have is very, very specific to their environment, and most of the time it will be, but that is certainly better for me to start with something that's specific to your environment and I can adjust it for mine. That way, if we take one vulnerability each, we can build the library of the content up together rather than always Puppet doing all of it. The 20% is because we all have that challenge to try and keep ahead of the growth of the content that's harmful to our enterprises. And that research was showing that had grown by 20% in the last 3 years. So we need to grow our defense faster than that because they have a head start and we're trying to catch up. And then the final point I wanted to leave on, this is GA already, so you can read more about it on puppet.com, /products/Puppet Remediate. I'm also available on social media as well, so if you want to talk to me more about this, if you're on the Puppet community Slack, there's a channel called prioritise-PDX. If you're not already on Puppet Community Slack, it's quite simple. You can sign up quite quickly. Or if you can't get onto Slack, I am also on Twitter or LinkedIn or in the bar. So, apart from that, thank you very much. So thank you for coming to my talk. I know there's a choice of a few talks, so I'm glad you're here today. Thank you.